And hey there, folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Interviews. I'm Arlyeon, and we're here today with Franciso Gonzalez of Grundislav Games. Did I get that right?
You actually cut out when you said it, so I didn't hear what you said. I heard Francisco Games.
Gonzalez of Grundislav Games.
Yeah, Francisco Gonzalez of Grundislav Games.
Grundislav. There's
Yeah.
like the rougher Grun.
Yeah, it's a long, well, not that long story behind that, but whatever. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Whom you folks might be familiar with due to games like Shardlight, A Golden Wake, and his upcoming project Lamplight City. Now, normally we like to kick off our interviews with a bit of information about the devs, and you've frankly given us fodder for our first question. So what is the story behind Grundislav Games?
It's really not that exciting. In 11th grade, my history teacher one day had written on the board Grundislav equals Gonzalez or vice versa, and I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, oh, that's the ancient Germanic variant of Gonzalez is Grundislav. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then all of my friends started calling me Grundislav, and then I just was like, okay, well, I guess I'll use this as my internet handle. And then when I started making games, I thought, well, I need a name. I guess I'll just use this one. And so that's where it came from. And I since have learned that actually the ancient Germanic form of Gonzalez is Gundisalv, but that doesn't sound as good as Grundislav. It just kind of not that Grundislav exactly rolls off the tongue, but at least it rolls off slightly better than Gundisalv. So
Grundislav. I don't know. It sounds dramatic enough.
I guess. I don't know.
So, what's your favorite game, and I guess what have you been recently playing as sort of a fun little topic?
It's hard to categorize my favorite game of all time. I don't really know that I have one single favorite game of all time. I can tell you what my favorite adventure games are. I like The Curse of Monkey Island. I know that I'm probably in the minority, but I think that's my favorite of the Monkey Island series. And I like the old Sierra games. Like I love the first Gabriel Knight game, which I can talk about a little bit more later because it's an influence on Lamplight City. And I mean, I like the old classics, the LucasArts games like Nickel and Loom, and I have a lot of favorite games. But as for what I've recently been playing, I've been playing the new God of War on PlayStation and really been enjoying that. And am very much. I was out of town, so I'm looking forward to getting back into it and actually playing it and finishing it because I've been playing it for a while and I'm looking forward to getting it done with it.
Press to boy.
Yeah. Boy of War.
Yeah. So, what got you into game development?
I just always really liked playing games, as hokey and cliche as an answer as that is. I just really liked playing. I mean, I grew up playing the Sega Master System and original NES, and I kind of sort of fluctuated between console and PC. Actually, I got a Sega Genesis, and I enjoyed playing games on the Sega Genesis, and then I kind of flipped over to PC, and I didn't come back to consoles until PS2, so there was kind of a whole generation there that I missed out on. But yeah, I always just really liked playing games, and I had a particular love for adventure games, and I always thought I would enjoy making my own. And a friend of mine in about ninth grade gave me a boxed copy of Click and Play, and so I started messing around with that and making like really dumb little platformers and like top-down racing games, and basically like making games making fun of my teachers in high school for some reason. And then I just kind of started wanting to try and make adventure games in Click and Play, and it kind of worked. But then I found a program called Adventure Game Studio, which was free to download, a few years later, and that's what I've been using ever since.
So, I mean that actually leads into the next question. Like, what sort of skills has game development required you to put to use, and where did you develop that, I guess, portfolio of skills?
Well, I think the first and most important skill would be programming, and I basically learned how to program using Adventure Game Studio, or AGS for short. Um, and that's really the only programming experience I have. I've been using the same program for 17 years now. Um, and I mean, it's I think it's based on C sharp. I know it has object oriented scripting. I've never really tried coding in any other programs, but it seems like it's not too different from your standard programming languages. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've pretty much just developed my coding through using that. And the thing with adventure games is that they're not super complex. I mean, they're only as complex as you make them. Generally, the kind of coding things you have to think of are just kind of like setting flags and variables. And if I picked up this item, then do this. Or if I talk to this person about this thing, then this option becomes available, that sort of thing. Um, but I've had to sort of think outside the box and get creative with certain things too, and that's just basically been through just experimenting and trying to figure things out and running to people with more experience than I do and begging them for help. Um, but also, since I kind of try and do all of my own stuff, I've also had to sort of develop my art and digital art skills. And like, I studied art for a while in high school and in college, but I realized very recently that, well, not very recently, but I realized somewhat recently that um, I was lacking in some very fundamental um, basics of art, like perspective, for example. So I've kind of had to. I've been sort of practicing and honing my art skills, and the first few games that I made, I did the art myself, and like I look at them now and I want to throw up. I'm sure most people do of their old. They can say the same thing of their old work, but like I literally want to throw up because I'm just like, oh god, what was I thinking? And but anyway, um, I don't know. I feel like I still have a long way to go, and I still have a lot to develop. But I am pretty much happy, more or less, with like where I'm at now for Lamplight City. Um, but yeah, art, programming, and also game design and like design theory and stuff like that are just developing kind of the skill of trying to know and figure out like what sort of thing works, what sort of thing doesn't work, uh what players like, how to avoid doing stuff like mazes and unfair puzzles and things like that. um so yeah, that's a fairly rambly answer, but uh there you go.
And admittedly, some bits that sound a bit stressful. So, are there any hobbies that you've taken up to help unwind from the game dev stress?
Oh, that's another. You'll pardon the existential crisis, but I've recently realized that I need more hobbies because game development used to be my hobby, and within the past couple of years, I've been lucky enough that it's become my career. And so I really, aside from like playing games, which is not really the best hobby to have when you make games, I feel like I should really pick up something else. I mean, I've been trying to read more and just kind of binge watch stuff on Netflix. Um, but I don't know. I feel like I should just try and get something more interesting. Maybe I'll take up like, I don't know, cross stitch or something. It's kind of like pixel art.
So, what was it that actually like drew you to the adventure game genre in the first place?
I always liked the the design and the mechanics of being able to explore worlds and solve puzzles and meet characters and stuff like that. And I realized that like I guess the difference between, say, adventure games and why am I a fan of adventure games and not, say, RPGs? Because I played a few RPGs when I was growing up too, but I think I mean, the very first RPG I remember playing was the original Dragon Warrior on NES, and it had elements like I remember reading the manual and getting excited because it talked about having elements that the sort of thing I liked in adventure games of, oh, go on quests for people and help them solve their problems and talk to them and that sort of thing. But the thing that I really hated was the fact that you had to like level up and grind and all that
But
stuff.
thou must. But thou
Exactly.
must.
I saw so many thou art deads that you wouldn't believe, and I have a horror story about Dragon Warrior. Um, if you'll indulge me, a brief
Oh, I will
tangent.
totally indulge you in this because I have some great bad memories of that game too.
Yeah, so I think I was about level 16, and I had played for years, mind you. On and off, and I just was like, okay, look, I've gotten to the point where I can go confront the Dragon Lord, and the game, I think I had, because I had gotten it free with a subscription to Nintendo Power, and so I had a guide, and the guide said that you shouldn't take on the Dragon Lord, who, for those of you not familiar, is the final boss, and it recommended you be at level 20. So I spent an entire weekend just playing and trying to level up, and like the further along you got, the more XP you had to get to level up. And like I'm going around looking for silver slimes which had like 100 XP or something, and I couldn't find any, and I just had to like slog through it, and I finally got as far as level 18. I was like, okay, fine, look, I'm sick of this. I'm not going to sit here. I've spent all weekend doing this. I'm just going to try my luck and go see the Dragon Lord. So I go see the Dragon Lord, and he says, "Oh, you finally found me. I give you a choice. You can either join me or fight me." I was like, "Oh, I wonder what happens if I choose to join him. Whatever. He'll probably just make me fight him." But no, he kills you. And then not only does he kill you, but he throws you back to your last save or something, which was my level 16 save. So basically, I lost an entire weekend's worth of leveling up, and I was furious. And so I went and I tried to fight him at level 16, and he killed me right away. And I was like, can I swear on your interview? Or are you going to bleep it out?
I mean, we can find out if the editor will bleep it out.
I was just like, F this guy. I'm done with this. And I never played Dragon Warrior again. So that was my horror story. So that's why I liked adventure games more, because
I think I walked
you didn't
in there
have to
at like 24.
Oh, you made it to 24. Jeez.
And then I sided with him.
Oh.
And he fucking killed me. I'm like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
I could have totally smacked you around. Yeah.
I'm sure if you had
beaten
him,
like it did yours.
Yeah, I'm sure if you had beaten him, you would have just gotten like a text on screen that was like, "Oh, you saved the day," so it wouldn't have been worth it in the end. But
I did end up beating it. The ending's not that great.
Yeah,
it's still not congratulations. It's not the Ghostbuster ending, so I'll take it over that.
Yeah, I actually played Ghostbusters on the Master System, which was way better port than the NES version. You actually got it was scrolling white text on a green background when you won, but it at least was grammatically correct. Anyway, yeah. So to answer the question, yeah, I just like the whole like going on quests and helping people and talking to characters elements of the gameplay.
Wait, so what about something like Baldur's Gate?
I don't know. I never really got into the whole Infinity Engine thing. Like, I played Planescape Torment and I really liked it, but Planescape Torment is really a lot more an adventure game than it is an RPG, because the combat is pretty much non-existent except for like one required fight. And I'll make it known that I had a really hard time with that fight. Almost to the point where I was like, well, I guess this is it. But then I persevered and I finished the game and I really enjoyed it.
It's the last boss fight. It's like the only one you have to do, right?
There's the Fallen Angel guy. Is he?
I haven't actually played. by
Oh,
the way.
okay.
I
There's
just know
two.
loosely.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, there's two. There's this character that's like a fallen angel, and you have to fight him. I don't think you actually have to fight the final boss. You can just sort of talk your way out of the final confrontation with him. So yeah,
Huh.
but yeah, I mean, I yeah, I'm not really too attracted to games like Baldur's Gate or Icewind Dale or any of those Infinity RPGs or
Icewind
BioWare or
Dale
anything.
is a lot more combat than Baldur's Gate is. It
Yeah, yeah,
it's a
that's what
lot
I've
less
heard.
character oriented,
Hmm.
whereas Baldur's Gate has the storylines and everything. Icewind Dale was like, hey, wanna play this with a bunch of friends and slaughter your way through a bunch of challenges. There is a storyline, but it's less focused on the characters as opposed to Baldur's Gate, which spends a lot of time working on a narrative.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I really enjoyed um, Fallout New Vegas. I mean, I've played all of the more recent Fallouts, but New Vegas is my favorite. And one of the things I liked the most about it was like the companion-specific quest lines that where you could just learn more about them and help them and that sort of thing. And then you get like their perks and stuff, which is a nice bonus. But yeah, I just like that the whole character-oriented gameplay,
Yeah.
and you see a lot of that in adventure games. Not all of them, but most.
On the subject of adventure games, you've worked on a fair number of collaborative projects by this point, which I think also sort of, I guess, segues into you sort of chasing down people to be like, hey, advice, tips.
Yeah.
So, how did you end up meeting those other developers? And do you have any fun stories about how those collaborative games came to be?
Yeah, mostly I met them through the adventure game studio community, which has always been a very open and very nice community. And I've met a lot of cool people through that and been a lot of cool places because they have like a yearly meetup in a different location around the world. And I've been to several of those. But yeah, I mean, through that is how I met Dave Gilbert, who opened his own studio, Wadget Eye, and he started off just making his own games, and then he opened up and started publishing other people, and that's kind of how I got my foot in the door commercially. Because he published The Golden Wake, which was my first commercial game, um, and also Shardlight, which was my first collaborative commercial game. Um, yeah, so as far as like the collaborative projects, yeah, there's a few. I did one. I worked on one called Little Girl in Underland with Erin Robinson, who you may know from. She released a game recently called Gravity Ghost, and she had also made a game that Wadget I published called Puzzle Bots. Um, there's a website Tig Source that had a competition, and they were doing demakes or something competition. So she wanted to do like a short little parody of American McGee's Alice as like a Soviet knockoff game. And so we made Little Girl in Underland, and she asked me if I would help her with the programming, which was funny because I have basically only AGS programming experience. I wouldn't consider myself a programmer at all, but apparently she felt less comfortable programming. So I was like, sure, whatever, let's do it. And I mean, it wasn't anything difficult. It was basically just move character, use different weapons on other characters. It was pretty much just click inventory item on character. So it wasn't like anything super complex. But that was a fun project to do because we actually came up with or she came up with the idea at at a meetup, an AGS meetup in France in 2008. So it was a whole bunch of us in this chateau in the middle of nowhere, France, like drinking red wine and basically laughing and cracking each other up and just doing ridiculous voices and like recording them, and that's what ended up in the game. um,
I approve
oh,
of this.
yeah, so that was a fun project to work on. And yeah, so like Shardlight was me and my friend Ben Chandler, who is now the artist, the full-time artist for Wadget Eye. I had this idea for I wanted to make a game that was set in like the medieval Black Plague times, um, and I had this very simple idea for it, and I was telling him about it, and we kind of just started talking about stuff, and I was like, hey, you want to make a game together? Because like we'd known each other for several years at that point, and like we'd each both made quite a few games. So I was like, hey, we should work on something together. So we started kind of developing this idea, and that's where Shardlight came about. And then it just so happened that we were both kind of involved with Wadjedi in different capacities at that point. So we worked together and made it and got it out through Wadjedi. So, um, but yeah, I don't as far as funny stories or fun stories, how they came to be. I don't know. I can't really think of anything fun beyond just, hey, let's work on something cool. Yeah, let's do it. Here we go.
So, quick aside then, how did
Yeah.
Shardlight end up going from like medieval to post-apocalypse?
There's really not that big of a difference if you think about it, because like you think about there's like class struggle and warfare, or not warfare. Well, I guess in some cases warfare, but like just the basic idea I had was that I wanted to have like a disease that was ravaging most of the populace, and like I had this idea for like a sort of representation of the Grim Reaper and bird imagery. And so, in just talking about it, we realized that the setting could easily fit a post-apocalyptic setting as well. And I mean, like I said, I had played Fallout, and I liked the idea of it, and so it just sort of transitioned well. So yeah.
Um, and just on the subject of your games, well, your
Hmm.
prior ones, have you ever
Hmm.
been tempted to revisit your Ben Jordan series?
Nah, not really. I feel like that series is kind of done. I've been asked a few times if I would ever make another one, but I really don't see a need for it. It's kind of, I did what I wanted to do with it. I finished the story. I don't really feel like it needs anything more. Um, so yeah, not really.
So, with that out of the way, then we can sort of move on to questions about your more recent project, which is to say, Lamplight City.
Hmm.
So, how did it come to be?
Um, I just it came about through a few different not methods. It came about from a few different sources. As far as the setting, I had wanted to make a game set in a sort of Victorian, kind of dark, inspired by Edgar Allan Poe slash Charles Dickens setting, because I really like that setting. It really appealed to me, and I was like, I want to make something here, but I don't know what. And then I was like, well, as hokey as it might be, Sherlock Holmes. I liked the Sherlock Holmes games. I like detective games. I liked the whole. Obviously, the Ben Jordan series was pretty much just a bunch of detective games, and detective games lend themselves well to the adventure genre. So I was like, all right, well, I want to make a detective game, and I want to set it in this time period. But then I also I heard a talk by Meg Janth, who worked on. She was the scriptwriter for 80 Days, the Inkle game, and she gave this great talk one time about failure and like how we're afraid to make our player characters fail, or just like not let them be perfect heroes, or just like limit parts of the story, because why should you, just because you're the player character, be a superhero who gets to experience everything just because? I'm sure there was more nuance to it than that, but that was kind of what I took away from it. So then I kind of started thinking about detective games, and detective games I've played, like LA Noire and Sherlock Holmes, Crimes and Punishment specifically, although I've played all of the.
Devil's Daughter also had fail forwarding in it.
It did. I didn't like Devil's Daughter as much as Crimes and Punishments, but I like that they still kept uh, that fail forward thing, that element to it. So pretty much, I was just like, well, I want to make a detective game where it doesn't hold your hand, and where it's possible to get things wrong. And if you do get things wrong, the game will still continue, but you'll have more consequences than just getting an angry letter from the relatives or whatever of whoever you falsely accused. So yeah, from there came Lamplight City, and I figured I wanted to make a game with multiple cases, and that would lend itself easier to to being able to have multiple character or multiple suspects and things like that. And then I read a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe stories and poems, and I read some Charles Dickens, and I was like, okay, well, I got some inspiration here. And then I came up with the idea, the overarching story of a detective who starts hearing the voice of his dead partner and who has to deal with it. And I knew that I wanted to have a sort of macabre tone to it, not necessarily something supernatural, even though I kind of toyed with that idea at first. But then I thought, nah, I want to keep this a little bit more grounded in reality and kind of have a more just like suspenseful sort of dark tone rather than just full out, hey, there's ghosts in this world sort of thing. So yeah, it was that's kind of where it came from.
So is there anything specifically that you draw inspiration for the artistic direction of the game?
Yeah, I there's an artist that is contemporary to the Victorian period, named John Atkinson Grimshaw, and he is kind of known for his night scenes of Victorian England. Um, and I just really like his style, and I really like how he draws clouds at night. And it's just this really moody and atmospheric, uh, just these scenes that he paints are just really moody and atmospheric, and that's kind of what I wanted to go for. So I took a lot of inspiration from that, and I just kind of looked up a bunch of just night scene painters. Even though the game is not entirely set at night, there are some day scenes. But for the night scenes, I was like, well, I want to emulate this. So yeah, I kind of studied those artists, and that's pretty much what inspired the look of the game.
So we've already talked about this a little bit in regards to things that sort of serve to inspire Lamplight, but is there anything you're specifically paying homage to in regards to the narrative? Or that is like inspirational?
I hesitate to say that I'm paying homage to, but I am definitely inspired by. I mentioned before that I really liked the first Gabriel Knight game. And I have no qualms about saying that I've lifted the aesthetic of that game as far as the character portraits being on a separate screen, a black screen, and just like the close-ups of the characters talking. I think it's a really cool way of doing uh, interrogations, and very few games have done it. So I was like, well, I can get away with doing this. There's a couple of like in the very first case, there's some elements of voodoo because like the city Lamplight City is just the nickname of the it's a fictional city. I should probably mention that the game is set in an alternate history, alternate timeline in a fictional city. But the city itself, New Britannia, is kind of a mishmash of all of the elements of cities that I really like that are iconic of the 19th century, like New Orleans and New York and London. Um, so there are some elements of voodoo in there. It's not like an outright, "Hey, what can you tell me about voodoo?" or anything like that. Like, I think there is an achievement that I called "What can you tell me about voodoo?" Is just a sort of little nod there. Uh, but um, but yeah, like it's not. There's no. I don't think there's any particular like lifts or anything like that. I'm not pandering to nostalgia. Like if people played and liked the first Gabriel Knight, I'm sure they'll think, "Oh, this reminds me of Gabriel Knight," which is great because it's a great thing to be reminded of. But it's not. I think it's enough of its own thing that people aren't going to think, "Oh, this guy's just trying to rip off Gabriel Knight."
Anything on the literary direction?
Yeah,
That's
definitely. I mean, I mentioned Poe and Dickens, and for a long time before I came up with the title, the code name was just Poe Dickens because
wait, really?
yeah, yeah. It was called Poe Dickens for a very, very long time. I mean, obviously that was never going to be the official title, but that's still what my folder for it is called. And I had a hell of a time coming up with the title Lamplight City, let me tell you. But anyway, um, yeah. So there's one case that pays homage to Charles Dickens' The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Um, there's several nods and references to Poe stories and poems and stuff. Um,
Is there a Rue Morgue somewhere in the city?
There is not a Rue Morgue, although I will tell you that there was one case that ultimately was cut where you were going to have to be looking for someone who had been buried alive, and it turned out that the person that was buried alive was a stuffed orangutan. but it was a bit silly, and so ultimately that got cut. So I just recycled some elements from that case into other ones, but there's no orangutan murderers or anything. There is stuff about live burial and the sort of idea of like transmigration of souls and what else did I lift? There's some spontaneous combustion, although I don't remember if Poe actually did that, but spontaneous combustion was a big thing in Victorian era literature. um, but yeah, and actually in a amusing little example of serendipity, the main character's name is Miles Fordham. And the reason that I came up with Fordham as his last name was because I was on the subway and I saw that there was an ad for Fordham University here in New York City, and I was like, "Oh, Fordham, that's a cool name. I like that as a surname. I'm gonna use that for my main character." And as it turns out, Edgar Allan Poe actually lived in what is now the Bronx for a while, and he wrote a poem called "The Bells." And the bells he was writing about were the bells of Fordham University. So I was like, oh, well, that's cool.
Just all sort of comes together full circle.
Yeah. It was a nice little coincidence. So I thought, well, if there's any sort of sign that I should be doing this, then I guess that helps.
So we've already talked about this, the idea of fail forwarding, that players will be impacted not only by the manners in which they choose to investigate, but also just if they get the outcome correctly, and the story will progress. Would you care to elaborate on some of the consequences or the ways that can impact a player?
Sure. I mean, I don't want to name too specific examples to avoid spoilers, but I guess
You can always give a hypothetical one.
Yeah, sure. Like hypothetically, let's say in case 1, you accuse suspect B. Let's say there's suspect A, B, and C, and you've investigated you've investigated enough, and you've got these 3 suspects lined up, and you decide to accuse suspect B. Then later in case 3, you're looking into a lead for someone you think is the possible suspect, and you go to a place, and it turns out that the sister of suspect B from the first case works there, and they're like, "Hey, you're the guy that put away my sister. Get out of here." And that lead is now closed off to you. You could also, for example, if let's say you accuse suspect C in case 1, and later on down the line you meet someone, and it turns out that they worked for that person, and that person was really a nasty employer, and they're like, "Oh man, you really helped me. I'm gonna give you more information now," or and then that lets you get a better outcome for that particular case. Or you insult somebody and they don't help you in that case, and then you meet them again in a later case and they're still mad at you, and they're like, "Well, I'm not going to talk to you. You insulted me. You're a jerk. Why should I help you?" That's kind of pretty much what I'm going for with that. Because I hate in adventure games, like when you have dialogue puzzles and characters get selective amnesia, and it's like you've just said the most horrible thing to them, but then you just talk to them again and they're like, "Oh, hello, what can I do for you?" So
I'm very guilty of doing that intentionally sometimes, just to like check out dialogue when I realize characters just keep letting me cycle through.
Right. Well, my hope is
so it's great when games call you out on that.
I mean, I'm not trying to be unfair about it. I'm kind of trying to, if you said this to a person in real life, their reaction is pretty much what a real person would do. It's not like, there's a couple of instances where being a jerk yields results, but more often than not, if you're a jerk, you're going to suffer the consequences of being a jerk.
Question here, and this falls in line with the fail forwarding.
Hmm.
is it possible to effectively preemptively screw yourself out of being able to win a case by the actions you've taken in a prior case? Or is there
Yes.
multiple?
Well, yes and no. So another thing that I forgot to mention that I should mention is that in addition to being able to accuse the wrong suspects, it's also possible to declare a case unsolvable, because if you screw up all of your leads and you reach a dead end point and you can't accuse a suspect because all of your leads to leading to those suspects have been closed off, you then have to declare the case unsolvable, but you move on to the next one. Um, yeah, let's say that like in case three, there's three potential suspects, and because you made suspect B's, or like the yeah, let's say in case three, suspect one works at a bank, and in case one you accused someone whose sister works at a bank, and then in case three you meet that person and they kick you out of the bank and you can't investigate that particular lead, then yeah, your actions of choosing the wrong person in case one have now closed off that lead in case three, but potentially you can still investigate the other two. Now if you in case three screw up those other two leads, then case three can then become unsolvable. Um, but it's not so much where like if you did something wrong in case one at the very end, it's going to be like, oh well, you didn't pick up that thing in case one, now you can't win the game.
So it's not that it's going to make, like, let's say a mistake in case one isn't going to make case three unsolvable, but it is going to make it more difficult.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, that was more or less the big crux of what I was curious about there, is
Sure.
whether there would have been multiple avenues towards solving it to
Yeah, although
yeah.
I did make a conscious choice to not let the optimal solution of each case be affected by other cases. You definitely have to is that right? Actually, let me think about that. Yeah. Yeah. You always have a chance to get the optimal solution in each case, but screwing up one case won't affect the ability to reach the optimal solution in other cases. You'll just have to
Have a
work harder
harder
to
time.
get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there ever a possibility that actually screwing up an earlier case can help you?
No.
Okay, well there we go.
No.
We always know if you falsely accuse someone, it will always be to your detriment.
Yes.
No
Yes.
throwing someone under the bus
The game rewards you for getting the optimal solutions.
and not being an ass.
Well, sometimes, like I said, sometimes being an ass gets you results.
Yeah, but
But
I mean, there's no accepting bribes, and like.
no, I thought about that later on. I was like, what? But it was just, at that point, it was just so overly complicated. I was just like, if I could go back and like put into, I guess that kind of leads into another question that you have. Spoilers, I have the questions.
Shh, shh.
All right, I'll hold off on that until you get to that question. But yeah, maybe
There goes my
maybe.
dreams of being the sleaziest detective.
Well, I mean, you can still be a sleazy detective.
I won't be the sleaziest though. I won't be letting murderers go free for like money.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I didn't put. Yeah. Well. Anyway, yeah. But also, if you declare too many cases unsolvable, you actually get a premature sad ending, and you don't get access to the last case. So there's something for all the completionists out there.
Huh. So, yeah, with all that said and done, then, let's move on to the next question, which is what was the hardest challenge when making this game?
Well, I think I just talked about it. It was definitely designing all of the cases and coming up with all the potential paths and making sure there wasn't any overlap or like any sort of just testing it and making sure that everything worked correctly was pretty challenging. But I think I managed to get it in the end. At least none of the beta testers so far have reached any impossible situations. So
Was there any particular, I guess, bugs or odds and ends during the development process that stood out as fun or noteworthy?
I'm trying to think. Not really. No. There wasn't anything like the character didn't like explode or turn upside down or anything when he should have been going, or like his head didn't fly off or anything like that. Yeah, no, it's pretty standard, boring. There was actually a fun bug. I mean, quote unquote fun. When I was in the process of replacing the placeholder art with actual game art, um, there was one character whose uh, primary view is when she opens a door. So for a while, she was just a giant door. When she was supposed to be like sitting, when we were supposed to see her sitting view, she was just like a door. So that was amusing, but it wasn't anything
I mean, it
to write
works.
home about. Yeah.
All right, so I guess we'll lead into this question now, since you seem to be looking forward to it. Is there anything that didn't make it into the game that you really wanted?
Yeah. So yeah, there was that. Like later on, after I had kind of designed it and implemented most of the stuff, I did think about that. Like, well, what if you could accept bribes? Like, what if the person says, "Oh, I'll pay you to not arrest me"? But two reasons that didn't make it into the game, and it's not necessarily that I really wanted it in there. I just thought it would make it a little bit more interesting. But one, it would have been way too complicated to implement at this point because it would have just been way more options and way more stuff to design as a solo developer, I didn't want to add more complexity to the project. And the other thing was that I don't know, it didn't like I like the idea of being able to, like, I do say, yeah, play it how you want. You can be an asshole or you can be a nice person. But it felt like it was a little too sleazy. Like, I don't know. At some point you have to recognize that you are playing as a character with a somewhat defined personality. Like, Miles is not a blank slate. Like, he has his particular things that drive him and his experiences and his conflict that he's going through. And I do give the player some wiggle room as far as, how to treat people and stuff. But I feel like it's within his character. And just to go all out and make him just potentially a really terrible guy, it just doesn't feel like there would be any sort of redemption or potential for, like, you don't want to you want to feel sorry for the guy because he's having a hard time. So just being able to do that kind of detracts from that. But I don't know, maybe in the sequel, maybe I'll put it in. It's something to consider.
Just the Dragon Warrior option at the end? Like, do I solve
Yeah,
the case or do I let him walk away?
yeah. I mean, there is a case, actually. The first case, one of the suspects, you can choose to condemn them or acquit them. Um, and there's other options where it flat out tells you, well, I don't think that this is the right guy, but I mean, he kind of he kind of deserves to go to jail for what he's been doing. So you can choose to you can choose to do that as well. But it's not so much, I'll pay me and I'll look the other way, sort of thing.
Fair. So it's a different form of dealing out justice towards what do you feel is the larger evil, even if you don't think he's the one who's guilty for.
Yeah, in some examples, it's not like that with every single one. It's just there's a little bit of variety there.
I think at this point we've probably touched on the mechanical aspects of the game that
Hmm.
you're particularly proud of, unless there's anything we've missed.
No, I mean, there's nothing really mechanically. It's a point and click adventure game. I mean, it's a single click interface. The one thing that's a little different is that there's no inventory. Um, as far as, like, there's no picking up items, store them in your inventory, and then use everything on everything. Um,
Oh, thank God.
there's Yeah, I hate that. And I just don't think that puzzles where you have to combine items to make other items really have a place in a detective game. Um, so it's pretty straightforward. Like if you find a tool that can help you later on the line or later on down the line, like let's say, just as a classic example, let's say there's a door that's locked, and you click on the door and you get the magnifying glass cursor and you look at it and he says, oh, the door's locked. um and in the course of his investigation he finds a hidden key, and once you find the key, then the cursor, when you hover over the door, now changes to a hand. And so, like, if you click on it, it might say, a little pop-up menu that says look at door or use key on door, and then you can use key on door that way. So that's how I'm kind of handling the picking up objects and using them in the environment thing.
So a lot more convenient and streamlined.
Yeah, it's basically streamlining the inventory so that you don't, because the focus isn't on inventory puzzles. The focus is on investigation and interrogation and clue solving and mystery solving. It's not, oh, I need to find a string to put on this stick to make a fishing rod to get this thing out of a sewer grate. Like,
After filling it with water.
yeah, exactly. There actually is a puzzle where you have to get a piece of evidence out of a sewer grate, but this might be a spoiler, might not be, I don't care. You just have to ask a sewer worker to open the grate for you. But you have to find the right way to convince him to do it. So that's the puzzle.
All
so
right.
There you go.
So, so far, do you have a favorite memory of watching someone play your game?
I haven't really watched that many people play it.
You mentioned there was the beta testers so far.
Yeah, but I don't watch them play it. They just kind of play it, and they write their notes in the document. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I have watched people play it because I've shown it at a few expos. I guess my favorite memory is just when people realize at the beginning what's happening. I mean, I guess it's not too much of a spoiler to, like I mentioned before, that Miles hears his partner's voice. I think at the moment where the game kind of reveals that that's what's happening right at the beginning, after the prologue, when people kind of are like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's a fun little moment. So that so far has been my favorite memory. I'm sure there'll be other points, hopefully, when the full game comes out. If anyone streams it, maybe there's a few points where I'm looking forward to seeing what people's reactions are. So,
all right, which I believe that more or less addresses everything I had to ask about Lamplight City. Other than just, once it is released, do you have any plans for content updates or features, additional cases, what have you?
No additional cases, but I am gonna be doing a developer commentary. Usually the past two games that I've done, or other games, I've done some freeware games where I've included it, and usually that's a feature that's included with the game. But this time around, I decided that I'm gonna do it after release, both because it's a lot of extra work, and right now I'm kind of nose to the grindstone, just trying to get everything in the main game done, and also because I want to try recording commentary once I've had a little while away from the game, and I think that might be helpful as far as like organizing my thoughts and talking about stuff and kind of talking about what people's reactions to certain things have been. So yeah, my main big update for post release is adding commentary.
All right. Other than that, do you have any other future projects planned for the horizon?
I do. I actually have two games in the pipeline, but I don't want to give out too many details about them. The first one, the one that I want to work on immediately after this, which of course this is all dependent on how well Lamplight City does. So please go out there and buy it, everybody. Let me keep making games. The first game is it's not a. I mean, they're both. Okay, let me start again. The first game is a spin-off. It's not going to be a detective game, but it's set in the same world as Lamplight City. It's just a different part of the world, and it's a different type of thing, but it's I'm excited to do it. Uh, and the other game is I do want to make another game in the Lamplight City franchise. I would like to make a sequel to it. I have some ideas. Obviously, the cool thing about making this sort of detective game is that you can make a bunch of cases for it. Um, but yeah, I'd be interested in doing another game that's set a little bit further down the line and kind of see how the world has changed and how things have progressed, and play as someone else, that sort of thing. So yeah, those are my two immediate projects.
In regards to that, since it'd be further down the line, would it be like a large jump, or would there possibly be a carryover of some of the players' choices from the past game in case they, meet the old protagonist?
um, yeah, that's actually a really good question, because I've been thinking about that, because there are some personal choices that you have to make in the game that are pretty. I mean, the game can end in some pretty different ways, so it would be kind of difficult to account for those. So I think I'm just gonna have to be lame and just like pick one of the endings as my canonical ending and jump forward based on that. Um, but yeah, as far as like taking the choices, or maybe just do something stupid like, "Hey, what did you do in Lamplight City?" Like a little questionnaire at the beginning. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead yet, so it's purely speculation at this point. But yeah.
All right. So, other than all this, do you have anything you'd like to share with the audience, or words you may have for aspiring devs?
Um, Words I may have for aspiring devs. Well, I mean, I guess the best thing is just go for it. I know that it seems like it's really hard nowadays, especially with so many games coming out and such a saturation of the market. But I mean, as long as you believe in what you're doing and you don't overscope your project and just make sure that you're working within your means, then there's really no reason why you shouldn't just try and make a game and get out there and overcome any sort of self-imposed fear hurdles. But yeah, that's just do it. Game making is great. I mean, I feel like I'm very 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 lucky to be able to do what I'm doing, and I hope to be able to keep doing it. Even though adventure games are a very niche market, and the market realities and all that stuff, but yeah, that's all I got.
So, lastly, are there any indie projects that you're following that you'd like to share with the audience?
um I'm really terrible at paying attention to other games. Um, there's no indie projects that I can think of off the top of my head that I don't feel like anyone else, that people don't really know about. I'm just like all I can think of are the big AAA titles that I'm excited about. I really want to play the Spider-Man game. That's about it.
Fair,
Um,
fair enough.
yeah, no. God, I have to think of at least one so I don't sound like a jerk. Um. Yeah. Okay. Wait. I've got two. Two really cool adventure games that are coming out. One is called Guard Duty, and it's by a friend named Nathan Hamley, who goes by Chicky. He did a Kickstarter for his game. It's a point and click. It's set in sort of uh medieval fantasy world, but it also is cyberpunk. It's an interesting juxtaposition there. There's also a game that's being made by a team in Transylvania called Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure, and it's a comedy, cartoony game about Cthulhu, or at least it's set in the Cthulhu mythos, I think. And it looks really really cool. So those are two projects you should check out. Those are two games that are on the horizon that are definitely worth checking out. And
Alrighty,
I
so
believe, Guard Duty already has a Steam page, so you can check it out on Steam if you're so inclined.
that's something for me to do after this interview then. Alrighty, so to the folks watching, first off, you can wishlist Lamplight City on Steam, as well as check out Francisco's prior title, Shardlight. For news, there's that Grundislav Games on Twitter. Plus, they have a nifty website and a Facebook that you can check out with links in this video's description. Do you have anywhere else you'd like to send people?
No, I think that's about it. That's all my social media stuff.
Got 'em. Alright, so first off, I'd like to thank you for actually providing the time and showing up on the show today. Like, I
Yeah,
appreciate that
absolutely.
immensely. Beyond that, to the audience, honestly, I appreciate the time you guys take to actually listen to me ramble, and also, yeah, that basically sums it up. So yeah, if you enjoyed this, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Also, check out the games, seriously. And yeah, I'll catch you folks on the next episode of Crit Hit Interviews. See ya.
Bye. 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 Bye.